with me here in San Diego, about 10 miles away, and I am serious. There is nothing better than having a professional collaboration with a woman who you deeply admire and respect and like. That is rare. You very rarely do you get to fall in love with someone that you admire in terms of their praxis and in terms of their pedagogy, and I get that. So it is an amazing thing to be able to be here. It's an amazing thing to be able to have someone like Charlene. Hello, Tika. Tika is also the second person here. You will see me bribing her with chicken treats throughout my presentation so that she'll stay quiet. So I have a full bag. Here's the thing. When we start talking about how to do online work with, as you're going to see, Danny's going to be showing you a slideshow later on, and I'll be talking while she does it. How do we do this work with intention and effectiveness? Charlene is absolutely right. It is not that much different than how we were doing it before COVID. I got to be in different places, you know, not just the coronavirus couch, but the basics, the foundations of laying for a good and durable community, both on an individual and on a corporate level, are still the same no matter how we do it. COVID has done some things in the way that a lot of diseases do. When my mom had a stroke in 1991, her neurologist told me, what you're going to see is that she is going to become more of who she is, both for the good and to the ill. We have seen this in COVID. We are now basically unfiltered. You know, if we were looking at our brains, the myelin sheath is off. It is completely raw nerve for the last 5 months, am I right? And because of that, there are some things that we were doing that we're doing more of. Hopefully we're doing more cleaving. We're doing stronger community building. And yes, we have actually tightened up some of our guidelines, because it's one thing when you could kind of be loosey-goosey, when people were more or less making sure that boundaries were respected, making sure that they were being good at carrying their own slosh. But it's true. It's true. 5 months into sequestration, I know that I am both the same and a very different woman than I was when I basically locked myself down in early April. And now I have to work sometimes on handling my own bucket slosh, as we say at Les Sunrays, which is handling my own emotional regulation, which is making sure that the community that I forge is actually authentic. It didn't matter so much 5 months ago if the places that we call community actually were community. A lot of times it was affiliations, it was alliances, it was a bunch of people, all of whom like to crochet. But is that really a community, or just people that like hooks that go like that? We like to use the word community, but we need to make sure that what we are forming, the group of people, whether it's virtual or actual, is actually worthy of that name. I would like to actually break the name down. There are a lot of people in this conversation today that know me. And so a lot of the things that I am going to be talking about is common knowledge to most of you. But for those of you who don't, I want to break down community together. Communal unity. It's not the only thing that we talk about when we talk about community, but that also means that we need to remember, particularly in an online-only adult learning environment that we have, that it's not just about us. And in this case, this does make it different than your typical Blackboard or your typical other online learning experience. I'm going to pick on someone for a minute because I see all these names. If Varda, for instance, were in an online learning environment and she was learning principles of accounting, she doesn't really have to care about the other 20 people in the room. All she cares about is learning what's in the book, putting in the right answers, maybe talking with her instructor, but she doesn't have to worry about the gestalt of the group. It is different when we are talking about learning something that is only done in the context of community, which is learning how to cleave and abide with each other. There is no way that we can learn relational ethics without, wait for it, are you ready? Hold on. Being in relationship. People like to kind of truncate that part of it, and you see that, and we'll talk about that later in the Lace on Race community. I read everything, I read the guidelines, I read the pin post, I'm done, I'm gone. No, you're not. That was the appetizer. You need to learn how to actually inculcate and internalize all those things that you read in 2.5 days. You can't do that. You can skim through. You know, you don't need chapter 3 in the accounting textbook, but you need chapter 4 where you're learning how to do reconciliations. But in the kind of reconciliations that we do, see what I did there? In the kind of reconciliations that we do, throw the book away. One of the greatest things that I learned in both my time, and I had 2 teachers that basically said the same thing to me twice. I had a theater teacher say it to me when I was acting, maybe, wow, good Lord, 30 years ago. And then I had a mentor who was teaching me counseling skills in my work as an addiction counselor that basically said the exact same things. They must have been having coffee together. Basically, everything you learn it all, open it up, learn it all. And then the theater teacher said, the minute you step on stage, forget everything you've learned. So did my counseling professor. The minute you step into the consulting room, forget everything you learned. And just be, and just abide. That does not mean take away the intellectualism, but what both of them were saying was that in order to do the work of being fully present, to be fully present to Kristen, to be fully present to Care, to be fully present to Danielle, it means that I need to lay everything that I know over here on the bookcase. There's a lot of books over here by the picture window. I need to forget them all. That does not mean a lack of intellectualism. That does not mean that you learn more and more and more. But it does mean that the reason that I'm here with you is not to impress upon you how much I know. It's not to impress upon you how many chicken treats I have for you. Here you go, baby, go. What it is, though, is that everything I know and have learned and brought to bear in this present moment at 3:43 p.m. Pacific time is brought to bear for Radha's benefit. And if it is not to bear for Radha's benefit, then it is an exercise in self-aggrandizement, any learning that I did. So a lot of times what we need to ask ourselves in online learning environments, particularly this one, is what are we doing this learning for? I just used Radha's name. She is one of our contributing writers, just like you are, Charlene. And one of the things that I do is I take her piece, read it, chew on it, read it again, chew on it again, let it go for a day, go like this a little bit, and then read it again. And then finally, maybe I'm close to getting it. But if that is the only thing I do with those words, with those beautiful words, I've wasted her time and the gift of those words to me, and I have certainly not inculcated them. I need to live those words out. It is not just enough for me to sit on this couch and ruminate on the words. So in an online learning environment like this, it is very much learn all you can, but remember why you're learning it. And that is why it's always good to have very much what we call a mission statement or a North Star. In any other online environment, it would mean in a more practical level, why are you doing what you're doing? It's not just to teach people about profit and loss statements in the accounting book, right? And it's not just to have people be well-read racists in the idea of an anti-racism online environment. Am I making sense so far? I'm not saying there are a lot of people have their heads blacked out, so I can't see them. So if you're hearing me and you're liking it, give me a little bit of feedback, because otherwise I don't know what I'm doing. There she is. There you go. Trust me, I don't bite. Actually, I do. But the whole big point of it, though, is remembering why you're doing it and what and who you are doing it in service to. That's true for anything. The accountant who might later on work for a nonprofit is doing it so that this nonprofit stays in business. But it's always good to not be in the weeds fake hair in my mouth. It's always good not to be in the weeds about what you're learning. You're learning from 10,000 feet. I am learning how to do reconciliations better so that I can be of service to my stated goal of lessening and mitigating the harm, in this case, lessening and mitigating the harm endured by Black and brown people, perpetuated by white people and other dominant cultures. Hold on. Wow, okay. If that's not there, that is why an accountant, and all she does is crunch numbers. But if she's doing that with that in mind, guess what? She is in service to the mission. So yes, learn the profit and loss. Read all of chapter 5. Internalize it. But remember why. Hi, I see you. Remember why you are doing it. Most of you guys, a lot of you, a fair amount of you have seen this slide presentation before. Can you begin to cue it up for me, Danny? And the reason that I want to, we're gonna skim right through it, but the reason why I want to give it to you, and I'm so glad Rachel's here. You've seen it before, Rachel, but deal with it. The reason I want to give this to you is that it really gives a good overview of what we do, why we do it. Yes, I'm gonna get rid of yours so I can have mine. There you go. Why we do it and why it's important in an online environment. I'm not seeing you anymore, Charlene. How am I doing on time? Do I have about 10 minutes?
You're good. I mean, we have quite a bit of time, so you're good.
Okay, good. Okay, so if you notice here, when we talk about the online learning environment, it is not, again, it can't be just to know more, just so that you can have more under your belt, so that you can talk about it at a cocktail party or when you're at parent-teacher conference. No. Activism is important and necessary because it allows us to make the world that we want to see for ourselves, for those around us, as well as for those whom we will never ever see, and for future generations. But we need to be really clear about what activism, and I am including learning in an online environment as activism, or actually more accurately, pre-gaming activism, if that makes sense. It's more than just marching, it's more than just chanting slogans. All of it's important. I've got the bunions and the blisters to prove it. What's more important, though, is what has and does occur inside myself and what we do our damnedest to help other people inculcate within themselves before you take that first step, before you take that first freedom song. Can I have the next slide, please? I don't know why I can't give myself the next slide. Aha, here we go. When we talk about internal work at Lace on Race, there's a lot of times that people think that we're talking about the passive. And let me tell you, anybody who's been around for the last 6 months in particular, when we have started really putting legs on our convictions and going out and using and practicing what we've learned, there are some who feel that, oh, wow, this isn't activism. Oh, but it most emphatically is. The skills that we're learning are deep muscle work, as my physical therapist, Chris, would say. If you look at these 6 skills, they're important on their own. It's the synergy, however, that gives them legs. First and most important is finding the love. And I'm going to pivot a little bit and talk to other online environments as well, because finding the love is important in the accounting class too. When I do not have the luxury of being able to look you straight in the eye one-on-one, I need to be able to love the learner. I need to be able to see what that learner has right now, in the here and now, before they've cracked open the accounting book. But I also need to see them a semester from now, when they've gotten what I'm going to teach them under their belt, and then them hungering for more, rather, whether it's from me or from someone else. Finding that love. It is impossible to do this work without a deep love at the core, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about different kinds of love as we move on, but for now, I think we can agree that without what I call a durable love, right? Love for the work, love of others, an authentic and generous and rigorous love of self, this work means next to nothing. Embracing the vision. We need to have a sense of where we want to go as we begin this journey together. It isn't enough to simply begin walking without a destination in mind. We need to have a vision, one that is flexible yet dreamable. We may not completely know what the landscape might look like. It might be a very lumpy landscape, but to have even an outline, using our imagination and our curiosity, we will galvanize and we will keep walking. We need to feel the fire. There must be a sense of urgency to this work. There's a phrase that I use a lot: with all deliberate speed. All four of these words are so crucial. It has to be a part of your internal action. All means that you're bringing your entire self, not just your head, but also your heart and your gut. And we must scan them to see if there are any resistances or blocks that could make our feet drag. That is every bit as true in regular academic work as it is in the work that I do, because I want to keep on making sure that everyone knows that this, our method, is generalizable. The reason that it's important to be able to have this kind of feeling the fire is because it's easy when you're by yourself in your kitchen table, or you've got 5 kids yelling at you, and you've got a spouse or a partner that wants dinner and you need to finish this one module. You need to feel the fire to be able to continue this work. You do not have 30 people in a classroom, all of whom are having a common purpose doing this with you. You have to become self-motivated. Scanning for skills means that there's acknowledgement that there are skills that we already possess, whether it's in the accounting class or whether it's in Liaison Race, that we have allowed to lie dormant or have misused or have never flexed at all in service to the work. If I were to take an accounting class again, I would be trembling, but I've been a student in one way or another, or an instructor in one way or another for 35 years. I know how to study. I know how to generalize and synthesize information. Whether or not I'm going to choose to be competent while I do this online work, whether or not I'm going to take what I know and do this, then that's on me. But feeling that fire and scanning for skills, it's intellectual, academic, professional, but it's also making the virtues and attributes unique to ourselves that cannot be left behind. I am bringing all of myself into Liaison Race. I am bringing all of myself into chapter 4 of the accounting book. We need to learn to harness these skills, which means we need to, wait for it, choose competence. I'm going to pivot back to Liaison Race for a minute. And the thing that I've been saying a lot in the last 6 months, particularly since we've had an influx of community members, who we call walkers, because we got on a couple of lists and we got a little bit of national traction. That was both a good and a bad thing. But people come in thinking 2 things. One, that they already know. I balance my checkbook, so I don't need an accounting class, right? A lot of people say the same thing when it comes to racial justice work. Knowing whether or not you have enough for the $4.99 half gallon of milk, and by the way, that is entirely too expensive for milk, I'm just saying, is a way different thing than what you're going to learn in the accounting textbook, and it's the same thing here. I had a Black friend in 11th grade does not mean that you have everything you need to go into this work. So what we can wind up having is kind of this duality of a little bit of arrogance. Actually, I know all that I need to know, so you can't teach me anything. But at the same time, I'm incredibly incompetent at it, and I'm ambivalent about becoming more competent. And we see this all the time when we are looking at how people flex or don't their skills and talents and knowledge into racial justice work. It's amazing. They just lose all their agency and all their volition and all their will. It's like, nope, you got this, which means you have to embrace the vision. You have to do all of these other things. I need to get right back. If I can't look at you and do this, there we go. We need to default to an active stance, which denies choice and agency, because that's, if we don't, we won't have good praxis. And finally, though I've said it, kind of circling around, we need to explicitly marshal our entire selves, who we are, what we possess, and what we know, to this work. This cannot be only a head game or a hard exercise. All of you must be engaged. Next slide, you should see a tree. In my doing this work, I have come to realize more and more that what people see is not as important and vital as what people don't see. I'm meeting my limit in the accounting textbook, so I'm going to set that textbook aside for a moment. What I mean by that is that the internal work that informs and drives who I am as a learner, in this case, I am learning activism. I'm learning praxis is so vital. That's why we have this phrase, lean in, plant roots, grow up and in, to grow out, is so important to me. It's the 5 tenets, and actually I've written about half of the 5 tenets series, and I am making a strong affirmation that I will finish it by the end of this month. It's what gives the work we do a sense of gravitas and importance and urgency. That is what gives me strength and resolve to stay the course. It's what makes me do this with clear eyes and audacious but realistic expectations. And it's also what compels me to take what I learned, what I have internalized and inculcated, out to the world. As it is for me, it is my hope that this ethos becomes baked into any given online community, particularly Les on Race, but any other one. Otherwise, we will be fatigued, we will be ambivalent, we will not learn as much and as well and as deeply as we can, because it is entirely true that an online environment has special challenges. Next slide. So when we think of activism, we think about this, bunch of people on the streets, and that's true. Next slide. But it's also this. This is activism. Picking up trash on your road, or licking stamps for 1,000 mailers, or writing 18 different sticky notes so that you can learn chapter 5, so that you can be an accountant. So is making 100 phone calls to Congress. Activism can be quiet and deliberate, almost invisible. This is the kind of activism, being willing to serve in whatever capacity, is crucial. I've spoken of bringing our whole selves into this. This absolutely does include our minds and our education. But again, while engaging this aspect of ourselves is important, it is also insufficient, because we don't want to hold the trash bag. No senior wants to take a 101 level course, am I right? In either the literal or the metaphorical sense. We don't want to do what we feel is beneath us. And I talk about it a lot more in the Vox article that we had the privilege of doing a couple of months ago, that a lot of times people come into activism or even academia feeling that I'm just going to check off the boxes, I'm going to get the piece of paper and no one can touch me. That doesn't work. It doesn't work for the long haul. It doesn't make for durable praxis. To be able to ask with full willingness and humility, how can I serve you? And being okay with spending your time folding chairs or diapers, being okay with a lawyer one by one, one by one, one by one in a swag bag, or being asked to implement policy or procedure that you didn't craft, or being okay with being on a committee where you've done development work for 15 years and there's a cafeteria worker sitting right next to you. Learning how to look people in the eye is absolutely crucial for us. Learning that others know as much as you, and that you don't have to insist upon primacy in the work that needs doing, is a great way to internalize true equity. Next slide. The relational is the political. We live and breathe this in Les on Race, and I will dare say that even when we are talking about more traditional learning environments, such as accounting, such as English, such as history, whether or not it is post-secondary or elementary to grade 12, we live and breathe the relational and the political into the pedagogy. We are committed to community, be it a community of 2 million, 200, or just 2. Sitting together, learning to walk in both meadows and crucibles. It is important that we learn how to do community effectively with heart and with resilience and with resolve. This is what's so often missing. It's so hard to keep promises to a random group of people, especially online. It is in the holding container that we co-create that is right relationship, is that we learn who we are and who we will be in relation to the other that is on the other side of the screen. But that, if we do it well, becomes as tangible and as visceral as if they were really, truly right here in my living room. Next slide, please. That is why contemplation and reflection is foundational. Without a deep understanding of why the work is so important and an internalized sense of our singular place in the vision, whether or not it's here in Laison Race or whether it's not as you are learning to get your CPA degree so that you can serve. Doing this with only superficial understanding is a sure recipe for burnout and attrition. We need to always check in with ourselves and with our fellow community members. Next slide. That is why we believe in internal work and external praxis. Most of you guys are already here, and I don't have to talk about it too much, but it is impossible to do a good internal praxis without internal work. This is actually right now, I want to break off a little bit and speak to instructors as much as I'm speaking to learners. There is no way that you can model chapter 4 in the accounting book unless you know what chapter 4 is, chapter and verse. Am I right? It is creating a sense of cohesion and creating a sense of community in an online only in my internal work before I flip open my laptop or I scroll on my phone. If I am not doing that, then all I am giving is instruction that's easily forgotten. Next slide. Activism and learning begins in the belly. So does teaching. We see that there is something that must be changed, something that the world needs more or less of. We need good accountants. We need good social and racial justice activists. How do we get there? We need to first look inside. We need to decide what our values are as budding accountants or as budding racial justice people, not what you think they should be, not what you feel will get you praise. I want to stop here for a minute because I want to talk to the budding accountant. If you're going into accountancy, that's what your dad did, or because that's what's going to get you the Lexus quicker, you're not going to make the best accountant. If you don't have a vision as to why you are learning what you are learning and the context around which you are learning it, then you will be a competent accountant. But will you be as great an accountant as you could? Let's pivot to race, which is what we talk about in Laison Race. If you're only doing it so that you can check off a box, or if you're only doing it because you're mad at someone, or if you're only doing it so that basically you can have something to talk about at the next cocktail party, that is not going to be a durable praxis. What do you think? Who do you want to be? That vision is what will guide your choices. We're not talking about drumming up a perfect, unchangeable vision, but rather a template that is flexible, but that has a core. Here are the essential queries before embarking on the journey, whether it be accounting or racial justice, that are applicable for both instructor and learner alike. The internal assessment of where you are right now, not where you want to be, is important. Aiming too low or too high can undermine. We have seen this, speaking specifically to an online learning environment, in workplaces all over the country, when fully a third of American workers are now sequestered in place in their living rooms or their patios or their kitchen tables. And they had to learn a new way of thinking. They had to learn just how to work completely on their own. It's the same thing here. So you can have the same amount of widgets or productivity, if you want to call it that, in an online environment that you have when everybody was in a room together. But you have to also be flexible. That 175 accounts that you want serviced may be serviced in a different way. If you aim too low, oh, well, they can't do it. Well, no, they can. We just need to be creative and curious. How can we do this? Pivoting to racial justice. How can I bring my real limitations and afflictions into this work? Capacity involves your knowledge, your time, and your commitment, and your priorities. What am I truly capable of in the here and now? And what am I willing to become more capable and competent in the future? Agency means that you believe that you can. It means less. It means that the kid or the kids or the husband in the back will not throw you off your game, and it invites responsibility. Frankly stated, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can become truly competent at this, you can. If you're not fully sure, then maybe recalibration is a no. So that you can ensure that your promises can be kept. Will builds on the first two. This work is a choice. The accounting book is a choice. No one is making you take this accounting course. Racial justice, done well and durably, is a choice. That means you make daily, sometimes hourly. If the work feels like an imposition, if it feels like something you'd really rather not do, you need to tell yourself the truth about that too. I have said this, I've said it in articles, I have said it in other presentations, and I have written it. Doing the work in half measure, doing the work with ambivalence is actually worse than not doing it at all. We both overestimate where we are with all of these things. That is why accountability and community are key. There are tools for self-assessment so that people can have an accurate picture of where you are so that you can know what you need to focus on to become the person you want to be on a more practical level. In terms of talking about online learning environments, I do think that it's good in these more formal settings to have a pre-test and later on a post-test, because you are not going to be able to see by body language, and sometimes you can't really even see in a Zoom chat who's really with you, where people actually are at the beginning of a given semester or quarter, and where you need to take them, where you need to walk with them towards the end of a quarter. With the online and learning environment of Lace on Race, it has sometimes felt like it's a 101 course over and over and over again. Our learners tend to stick around in a durable way for about a semester, about 3 months. Now that I have actually told myself the truth about that, I have adjusted my instruction thusly. I don't think as much about cumulative, although I'd like to begin to, which is one reason why we're starting a different way of doing things. I think you'd like it, Charlene. It's called Chef's Table. We're a dedicated cohort who are dedicated to being here for 6 months to a year. I will be able to think long-term, high-aim steering, as opposed to basically Groundhog Day every day. So let's talk about urgency and knowledge. Flip over to the one with the word. They're both needed. We need to feel a burning to do it now, not wait, but we need to be mindful and knowledgeable, not just in academic knowledge, but also in emotional and relational skills. And that is exactly what I mean when I talk about choosing to be competent in the work. As you can probably gather, the best place to be is in that top right quadrant, right? High knowledge, high urgency. Danielle, are you there with me? I'm sure we are. Most of us start somewhere within the other three. Those in the bottom left quadrant are probably not reading this or here at all. So we don't have to worry about bottom left. Low urgency, low knowledge. Top left is galvanizing. It's exciting and ultimately by itself, absolutely unsustainable. We have seen a lot of this. We have seen a lot of this in some of the controversies that we have had in terms of dealing with bad behavior in online spaces, where people know a lot or they have a lot of urgency, but they either don't know the things they need to do or they don't competently perform it, which is as bad as not knowing. Some of us are top right on engagement, bottom left on outside praxis. Some are the complete opposite. None of us, not including me, is top right all the time in all aspects of the work. So a community is crucial for sussing out where we are, how we can help and be helped by our fellow walkers. In terms of online pedagogy, that's actually also true. There are times because you aren't going to be able to see them, and you aren't going to be able to, like 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for an hour, you are not going to be able to tell whether or not they did the work that they needed to be able to do the next time you're in a Zoom chat with them. You don't know where they are on these quadrants, and you can't assume high knowledge, high urgency. You can't assume low urgency, no knowledge. And sometimes the very people that are giving you the most engagement in a Zoom chat are the ones that are actually forgetting about everything the minute they close their laptop or put down their phone. And you need to be able to suss that out. Stages of change, trans-theoretical model. In my work as an addiction counselor, this is where I first was acquainted with the stages of change, and I have found that this is so important in terms of an online learning environment, because every single time, especially with an online learning environment like ours, opt-in, opt-out space, no prerequisites really, and so every single time I'm encountering someone, I'm making a quick and dirty assessment as to where they are. And in my mind, I'm using my fictive imagination and my optimism and my hope to have an idea of where I hope they will be. I'm praying that I have enough time to make that vision come true. That is another reason for Chef's Table. We've talked about all of this, pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, determination, action, execution, maintenance, relapse, and termination. You're going to see that this looks a lot like the 6 elements of integral action. We're not going to talk that much about adult attachment theory, but I think if we had a little bit more time, we would. But it's a big part of you feel attached to the community. If you feel attached to the instructor and vice versa, you're going to be able to glean more and retain more. It does not have to be this, but it can be a healthy attachment. One of the questions for attachment is, will you be there for me when I need you? And learners ask instructors that every single time they open up their laptops and open up their notebooks and they're accepting instruction and tutelage. The instructor is also asking that of the students. It is hard to play to an empty room. And for instructors who are learning in this Zoom online environment, this new environment that people are learning, it is hard sometimes. When I do videos for Lace on Race, it's just me and Tika and the living room. I don't know who's listening. I don't know how it's bouncing off of people. I don't even get a lot of comments, at least at first. So I have no idea how my words are landing, or if things are being internalized, or if someone's scrolling and rolling on their phone, or they're thinking about, do they want Taco Bell or McDonald's later? I don't have the same visceral energy that can flow in an in-person learning environment. So we need to be able to think about that. We need to be able to make promises with each other, whether or not they're stated promises. And in an online environment, it's all the more crucial that we meet them. So now let's talk about relational ethics. Can we jump over to that one? It's a green slide, relational ethics. Here we go. Nonviolent, full respect living in the classroom and also in an online racial learning environment. What we mean here is that we are bringing our best selves. You guys can read it. It means that you do not, and for those of us who are in Lace on Race and have kind of lived through the last couple of weeks with some pretty bad actors, I want you to really take a look at this slide. In fact, to staff who are in on this call, could we break this slide out and we can actually put it up in a post, because I want to talk about this later on. No grandiosity, no shame, no toxic hierarchy, no strata. We need to remember who we're talking to, and not just in the people that have decided to be a cohort and a community together, but also people who want nothing to do with us, who are actually here to be a bit disruptive. And particularly for instructors who are teaching courses that are compulsory and not opt-in, opt-out, you are always going to have someone in your classroom that's kicking and screaming. And the way to be able to give them the honor that they need, because they're kicking and screaming for a reason, but also to be able to give good instruction and praxis and being present to the bulk of the class that wants to be there with you. This is the way to go. We've talked about the 5 losing strategies and the 5 winning strategies. I'm not going to go that much about it right here, but it also works in an online environment. The losing strategies that we've seen a lot of in the last 2.5 months at Lace on Race with various people have been being right, trying to control the situation, retaliation, unbridled self-expression, and withdrawal. Winning strategies work with every single relational. I'm thinking of the word circumstance, whether it be dyadic or whether it be group, shifting from complaint to request, speaking out with love and savvy, responding with generosity, empowering the other, and cherishing what you have. There is so much of the left, right? We see it in almost every relationship we have. What bullet points here are your biggest challenges on the left side? What points on the right are you developing? Next slide. Remember who you are talking to, whether or not it be the accounting class or an online racial justice space, and remember why you are doing this work. That is one reason, by the way, that I came up with our, some people call it a motto, I call it a mission statement, to lessen and mitigate the harm endured by Black and brown people, perpetuated by white people. It is the same thing in any other online space. Why are you here? It is not just to check the marks off, right? So that you can go to the next 200 or 300 level class. It's not just so that you can do something more important later. The reason why you are doing this work is so important, because if you don't see an import and you don't see a larger picture, it will be very easy to abandon the work. That is why love is so crucial. If we are not pursuing justice with love, if we are not pursuing teaching with love and learning with love, we need to just hang it up. Do you love the principles, the overarching ethos? Do you love the people you are standing with and for? Do you love the people walking with you? Do you love yourself to believe in your core that you do indeed have the capacity, the agency, and the volition to do this work with intention, ability, sacrifice, discernment, and resilience? Not just for yourself, but for the people walking with you, not just as an instructor, but also as a learner. What kinds of authentic, accent on authentic, self-care can you utilize to help get you there? Here are the 7 types of love. I'll let you read them, but I want to focus on the one that isn't here. All of these can be in service to teaching effectively, to learning effectively, but this 8th form of love, Hesed, next slide please, is exactly what is needed here. Take a look at the attributes that surround Hesed. Next slide. It's kind, it's loving, it's reliable, it's muscular. It's no nonsense, it's faithful. If you bring Hesed into your classroom, online or not, if you bring Hesed to your instructor, online or not, if you bring Hesed into your community of fellow walkers in learning, online or not, there is no way that you will not be changed, and no way that other people will not be changed by you. It's 4-dimensional love. And so now when we talk about growing up to grow out, we've talked about this. We collectively need to grow up. Those of us who are learners need to absolutely decide that I am capable and will. Not I will try if I can, but I will. If you were going into an accounting class, there's no way that you could tell your instructor at the beginning, I'm not really sure how well I'm going to do this. Don't expect very much of me. But in online learning environments, particularly online learning environments that are opt-in and opt-out spaces, people go to great lengths to make sure that I set the bar incredibly low for them. That is not growing up. Growing up is, I'm here because I want to be, and I will do this. I will learn to hold on to ourselves and to drop toxic defenses. I will learn to be impeccable with my word. We're talking about maturity here, as learners and as teachers. We're talking about moving the ball forward so that we can take our internal convictions and bear good and nourishing fruit. We need to have lives that are attractive enough that people will want to hear what we say. So when someone is listening to you talk about reconciliation, both kinds, see what I did there? People want to hear it, but you need to be an attractive accountant. You need to be an attractive walker. And you need to make sure that you have read the entire book thoroughly so that you can then instruct others. Next slide. Focusing on the internal for maximum external effectiveness. This is true for every single online environment. And we've already talked about it. No work can be driven by or conditioned upon transient feeling states. That is so true in online environments, particularly where unless we set up mechanisms where there is skin in the game, there won't be skin in the game, which is one reason why we need to make sure there's skin in the game. I need to learn and model good praxis whether or not I feel like it today, whether or not it makes me itchy or nervous or anxious. It's the same thing for the accountant. You can't forget half of what you learn just because you're not in a good mood. We need to also practice high aim steering. Next slide, please. This is about looking towards the horizon. It's not just about the semester or quarter class that you're teaching or learning, or in our case, it's not this opt-in and opt-out space. We need to think about, what do I need to learn and how long will it take to get here? We can't worry about every single pothole. We miss a whole lot when we're only fixated on short-term goals, which is why, for us, having a North Star is so crucial. If I really do want to lessen and mitigate the harm endured by Black and brown people, perpetuated by white people, I know that I'm not going to get there in 3 months. As we practice skills and get better and better, we are walking towards something bigger than any one of us in an online environment, either as a learner or as a teacher. Last slide. I just want to thank you to be able to present this to you. I hope it was of some use and some value. And I will give it right back to you, Charlene. I've taken up some time, but I think that there's still some room for questions. Did you have any?
Thank you so much, Lace. We definitely have time. We have quite a bit of time, so we can ask questions and talk. If there's anything else you want to contribute to, please feel free. I do have a brief question popped up if we can have the slides available. I don't know if you want to provide them in a different format as well, but so that way everybody knows this is being recorded and that will be uploaded to the Dignified Learner Project's YouTube page. So you will be able to have access to it there as well. But if you need slides, like access to them, I'll let Lace. I saw Danielle was going to say something, so.
I was just going to say to Lace that I could make them available in a PDF format if you wanted. You're muted now, but I think you're saying yes.
Great. And then, so I have a question that was submitted. I can't quite see who it was submitted by. Give me 1 second. For some reason, it's not showing up on my end, but there was a question submitted on the form online. And the question was, it's kind of a two-part question. The first is, how should community members who participate more consistently engage and hold accountable members who engage sporadically? And then the other question was, what are some ways I can translate these lessons on virtual community to teaching remotely? You're muted, Lace.
Lace, you're still muted. Yeah, get all those words
Okay. I'm back. Okay, everything that I just said was true, and it was really great, and I'm sorry you all missed it. Wow, I feel bad for you. No, what I actually said is that I really did try to inculcate some of the things that are generalizable to online learning environments and more traditional settings. You actually have both an advantage over me that I have in that opt-in, opt-out space. People do what they want, when they want, if they want. It is much, much more, let's just say, self-directed than a traditional space would be. In terms of the challenges that you have that I don't have, I do get to speak to a larger amount of people. So I can use my fictive imagination, and I'm thinking about a larger cohort of people. I'm thinking of people that are coming in 101, and I'm thinking of people that are also graduate level. I remember a million years ago, 1974, when I was 11, there was an alternative school in San Diego that opened up. Hippy dippy, Ernie McRae, if you guys know him in San Diego, one of the greatest educators in San Diego. And he opened Your Alternative, and it was great. K through 12, I came in at 6th grade. I could sit in on classes, and I did at San Diego State. And that was terrific. It was great that someone thought my 11-year-old mind could handle a rhetoric class at SDSU. A lot of times people in online spaces can go, I don't know what I'm talking about, but these two people are talking about graduate level things, and even though I may not have anything to say right now, I am absorbing almost by osmosis what this is. That is an advantage that I often have. You see it sometimes in elective classes, right? But in terms of being able to impart a big chunk of things that you have to get into that head in 16 weeks, it's a different game. But I will say this, that whole creating community is also awesome for creating shared accountability. We try really hard not to have tiers at Lace on Race, but it has sort of shaken out that there are some people, you know, out of approximately 10,000 people, there are about 400 who participate at any given time. That changes a lot. And those of you who are in Lace on Race, we are gonna talk about churn. But there are about 100 to 150, 200 if you want to stretch it, that are here for the long haul. I absolutely know that I can depend on them, which means I can throw more at them. That is one reason why we are actually going to change our format somewhat. People that are kind of just in, I call it, if you just want to come to the lunch counter, right? The takeout counter and get French fries and a chocolate shake, you can do that. But what we're also wanting to do is do a chef's table. And in an online learning environment, you can actually do that. So if I've got 100 people, I'm going to make sure that I push the information that I need to push on them. I'm going to make sure that no one is getting short shrift. You're going to get a damn good chocolate shake. You're going to get really good French fries. But I'm not going to give you asparagus tips if you're just going to throw them away. But there are learners who really want asparagus tips, right? There are learners who want beef bourguignon. So I am going to make sure that I do this, but it's really hard to set the table for 10,000 people with your absolute best flatware. Everyone in Lace on Race has already heard this illustration. You can sleep for 10 seconds. It's really hard to set a table for 9 or 10,000 people when you know that in any given week 400 are going to show up, but you're not sure what day, and maybe anywhere from 100 and 150 are going to show up every single day. But I still have to buy and prep those materials. I still have to buy and prep that and make a meal, or at least have the potential for making the meal for everyone. You can see how that can diffuse my energy. So milkshakes and French fries at the front counter. If you want to come in, come in. Come in. Sit at the chef's table. Eat the beef bourguignon, but also learn how to prepare it. Learn how to clean up after yourself. Learn how to work that front counter, right? So there are ways so that you can actually use some of the limitations of an online space to your advantage. There are always going to be people that want to go farther and faster. It makes a little bit more work for you, but it's actually worth it. I see you. Sorry. There you go. It's a little bit more work, but actually by the end of a given cohort, those people that are going to be at this metaphorical chef's table, I know I have them for at least 6 months to a year, which means I can play long game with them. I don't have to try to stuff a lot of things in there. I can wait until I'm really sure that foundational concepts are inculcated, and then I can go a little bit further with them. That's actually really awesome, and I love when I can do that. What was the first question that I have not answered yet?
I actually think you touched upon the first one, but what were you addressing right now about the engaged and sporadic ones?
Right, exactly.
So the second question was, what are some ways I can translate these lessons on virtual community to teaching remotely?
Yes. Well, again, one way is to have either in terms of your own head or in terms of more explicitly, not necessarily different levels or strong pyramid top down, just on an ethical level. I really don't like kind of, tier A, tier B, tier C, right? Because, all of us who basically were shunted into reading groups in second grade know that it can follow you. I really do think that the tier A kid can learn tier A work, okay? But they need to be able to be allowed to learn it. And it also sometimes works if the tier A kid tutors the tier C kid. Sometimes it can't be, it simply cannot be me giving this instruction. In my online space, there are times when I will literally back up and allow other people to dialogue with each other. I carry the imprimatur or the persona of Lace on Race. The persona of the instructor carries a lot of weight. So that weight can also be, oh my gosh, I must learn it all. Or it can be resistance. You're not the boss of me. But if Jennifer is actually working with Claire, Claire's resistances are down. They're two fellow walkers working together. So there's a lot less of that resistance or ambivalence going on. If I need to step in, I can step in. That co-learning, co-teaching, co-counseling, co-leading, so that we're not just teaching them, we're also teaching them to lead. And in terms of learners kind of dealing, and we've seen it in Lace on Race. We should be a lot farther in a lot of modules. We should be done with at least the beginnings of Terry Real, for example. We should be done with the 4 tenets. There's a lot of things that we should be done if it weren't for foot draggers and people who are intermittent and sporadic. You are going to get that less in spaces where they have to show up for 16 weeks if they're going to get a grade. With us, though, it's different. You can pop in and then life gets in the way and then you come back. That's harder. And what we're going to try to talk about more, all of you guys from Lace on Race, is not just the effect that it has on me as your putative leader and instructor, but also what it has, the effect on your community members as well. Y'all need to be able to ask this question that Sue Johnson asks of each other. Will you be there for me when I need you? It is obvious when Rhoda's not there. It is obvious when Kristen's not there. We know who we expect to see, and we know when people drop out or drop back in. And so basically, if you create a community that people want to come to, not, oh my God, I guess I'll have to do Lace on Race. No, it's a place where you're eager to come. Or what is that crazy lady gonna say next? Or, wow, there is something about Claire that I really, really want to inculcate. Less so in like a more traditional learning environment, I will grant you. But actually, I have been in environments, just more traditional learning environments, where it's like, oh my gosh, I want some of her. I want exactly what she's got, which means I need to show up Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to get what Charlene has. I mean, sometimes it's not the instructor that brings me in, especially if it's a class that I kind of feel like I already know the basics. I just need some fine tuning. The fine tuning comes in the community. Is that making sense? Charlene, is that making sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just wasn't sure if you're asking like for for everybody else too. But,
thumbs up me if it makes sense, because you know me and positive reinforcement. Thank you.
Hey, Lace, would you mind me adding a little bit to what you were saying too?
Please. Give me time to take a drink.
So I did a brief introduction for the nonprofit, the Dignified Learning Project, but a little bit about me is I was a college professor for about 4 years, and I recently transitioned to teaching high school as well. So I actually started teaching high school in January, so that was a really fun transition just before COVID hit. Surprise. But there was a couple advantages that I feel that I had that when this happened is that for me, before I switched to high school, unlike most who take that route, I had been doing thorough, deep power analyses for years as a part of my research. And I'd already been very critical of the institution of education. And one of the things I just kind of want to note in terms of that I really appreciated what you were saying, Lace, is how you avoid the tiers and the strata, right, at your at Lace on Race. And I think that that's a really important part to kind of consider when we're thinking about teaching remotely, is that all of the things that we're expected to dedicate 3 to 4 hours on daily, which is really classroom management and behavior management, which is problematic. I have a ton of commentary to say that we don't have enough time even today to talk about.
I wish
But,
we did, because it's a lot of, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
no, you're fine.
I have never used the whole term behavior management in terms of what I do in Lace on Race, but a lot of that is
Yes.
in an adult learning environment.
Right.
Keep going.
Right. And so and the idea of behavior management in the classroom for kids is the expectations are different, and it's definitely packed with a lot of white supremacy and oppression as a whole, which again, we don't have time to get into that, but it's necessary, and I do plan on talking about. That's something that Lace and I have talked about too in the future of kind of getting into. But a lot of those things we don't have to manage the same way or take care of the same way now that we're not in a classroom physically together. And that gives us some flexibility in how to kind of translate some of these things into the online environment. It does make it harder because we cannot imagine creating community outside of what we're used to, which means that we have to really kind of think beyond what we have historically been used to, right? And I think that really kind of taking a step back and rethinking how we define community, which is something that you talked about at the beginning, Lace, right, is important, but also rethinking everything that we knew. And that means that sometimes, right, reassessing your position as the potential oppressor in a classroom. Right. Like the teachers tend to be oppressors, and there is that power dynamic that we cannot escape. And if as a teacher you haven't assessed that power differential, then there's a problem. And so really, like, I really appreciated what you said, Lace, about, that sometimes you just take a step back and the dialogue isn't even between you, right? It's between the community members. And I think consider like how you can reshape that and reframe that in a virtual setting is really vital, right? And remembering that as the teacher, right, like, there's this kind of this relationship of oppressor and oppressed that you really have to constantly break down, and I think that that assessing that for the online community is important, because you can't send the student to the vice principal. Not that you should. I'm adamant against that stuff, but like there's things that tend to be what people rely on that are not accessible anymore. But then there's also another side. One of the things I've always loved about Lace on Race is this idea of being welcomed into your living room, right? But now we have to remember, as teachers, we are quite literally being forced to enter our students' living rooms. And it's not voluntarily, right? So understanding that if you force them to put their screen, like, there are other ways of engagement and community building than having to force the screen on, than having to force them to talk, right? Like, even in a classroom, that can be problematic, right? Making them to talk, like, because of all so many different things. But we are quite literally now shoving our way into their living rooms, and we have to understand now that we have to respect those norms and values for them, but also recreate a more equitable community together.
Oh, absolutely. And those class markers that you can see in those living rooms,
right,
that nobody wants to talk about. Oh, okay. Well, is that a Picasso print? Oh, okay. Well, all of these things that you can kind of get sort of in subtlety with with the students and even with the teacher. All of a sudden, there are more. Put it this way: in this living room, what you can see, there are enough tells here that you can know more about me than I might first want you to know. And it's the same thing with kids who have way less control over their environment than I as an adult have. And so having teachers, and I've seen this, I don't know how you feel about this, Charlene, but having teachers that refuse to let them use like the green screens behind them so they can be where they want to be instead of perhaps where they are. It's one thing when you're borrowing your father's law study, right? It's another thing when you're sharing one bedroom and it shows,
right,
right. Or you can see food being prepared, right? All of these things have to do with class, with income, with how students interact with each other and how the teacher interacts with the students. And so I think that those things were not thought of. They couldn't have been thought of. But I do know that these days, I think that unless we are making the covert overt, as Terry Real would say, and talking about what are kids learning that we don't want to tell them yet. What are they learning because of us? What are they learning in spite of us? And again, going back to how am I as an instructor, either part of an oppressive system, or how am I subverting an oppressive system? Those, I think that is absolutely both fair to ask.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And subversion in this case is a good thing.
Yeah, thank you for that. So did anybody have any other questions that they want to ask? You can either type them in the chat bar or you can unmute yourself and ask it. It's, now is the time for our, community questions.
I dare you. Ah, here we go. Hi, okay. That is a great question. Thank you. In case anyone hasn't read it yet, a follow-up question to the idea of having students engage with each other rather than just the teacher. How would you suggest approaching administrators who are against that virtually because of confidentiality concerns? I'm going to let you take that one, Charlene, just because I think the most I've had experience with has been as a learner in like Blackboard environments, and we were allowed to interact with each other. Are there places where that's less true?
So this is a new situation for everybody, right? And so first off, I would be really surprised if okay, let me rephrase that. I am surprised that there are administrators out there who are opposed to that, especially if, Zoom classrooms are essentially the thing and you can create like breakout rooms and such. The biggest thing that I would say, there's kind of two things that I feel like that kind of need to be addressed with this. The first is perhaps approaching administrators in a way that discusses it in the framework of equity, right? Like, so the idea of students being able to feel more comfortable and it's equitable for students who perhaps maybe have anxiety or IEPs around, smaller group interactions. Maybe you could approach it in a way of, equity, that they're working with their peers. The other thing, which is the less preferred way, only because we would like to think administrators would have our back, but we know that that's not the reality most of the time, is that there are different technological tools out there that you could create a more like online kind of thing, like, and it's like there's a whole list of them and there's a ton out there, but I think kind of figuring out ways to use what we've got for us. So some schools had switched to Canvas, for instance, and you can create like groups on Canvas of like groups of student learners who maybe they like do peer editing or they collaborate or something like that. I know for my kids' school, my kids were in kindergarten and second grade. They would have like one class group, and then they would have like scheduled or staggered times where like maybe 5 of them would meet together at different points, kind of like it wasn't like learning groups in like a tracking sense, but it's just kind of like maybe by name or something like that, where they would come together in different environments. I think maybe the first step in that case would be to approach administrators and ask them like, what could you realistically do? And then then reach out, I mean, as for us, we're more than willing to collaborate and talk to anybody who wants to just kind of throw around ideas too. So I think maybe the first step is to approach administrators even to think about how, what is allowed in terms of that smaller thing, because, as much as we would like to say, screw the system, I'm going to do it anyway because it's in their best interest, we also know that that could be very problematic in certain spheres in terms of like long term, right? So I think maybe start like, I guess Jesse, the biggest thing is like, if that has happened, what were some of the confidentiality concerns that had been addressed or maybe came up? I'm not sure if that answers your question. I think really that it's a matter of like knowing what you can do and then kind of figuring out ways to kind of work around it within that, while also still making sure that students are getting what they need and are remaining safe too. Jennifer, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. You.
No, go ahead. I was just going to go to the next question, but if you had something to add, please.
No, go ahead. No, I was going to do the next question.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll let you read it.
So Jennifer asks, in an online environment, so much of tone and body language are lost and people can't break out and support each other, regulate emotions and work through discomfort. How do we tell the difference between accountability and more toxic aspects of cancel culture or call out culture, as the Lace and Race community was recently accused of participating in? That's a great question.
I have
Please
thought.
take that one.
Yeah. Hi. I did not pay Jennifer to ask that question, although this Chips Ahoy is definitely for you. Okay. I wish we had more time, but guess what? I'll do a video on it. But in terms of this, for this environment here, I think that is one reason that we have guidelines. Another way of saying it is norms. Another way of saying it, if you want to be a bit more traditional and a bit more top down, is rules. There is not, cancel culture should not be conflated with accountability. However, if you have enough buy-in for various people in the given cohort, there is a bias towards pro-community behavior. That's just basic social psych. The problem with it is that when people are coming in without the stated ethos inculcated, and they don't have that buy-in, which is why I keep on saying, read the guidelines. When you're here, you're family, which means there are no lurkers, there are no spectators. If you are here, are you here? Are you? No one, there's not a single thing that coerces you to come into the Lace on Race environment, right? So if you're here, you are here using your own capacity, volition, and agency, and you are expected to use those three virtues in service to giving your best. In terms of cancel culture and call out culture, people who tend to talk about cancel culture and call out culture tend to be perpetrators. Yes, I said it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with basically saying, I will hold you to a standard that you say you have. Let me take a slightly whimsical example. I used to use smoking, but a lot of people get really activated with smoking, so I'm going to use rutabagas. I am completely agnostic about rutabagas. Some people love them, most people don't. For whatever reason, they're still sold. Rutabagas. If you come up to me, I'm going to pick on someone that I know here. If Rachel comes up to me and says, I'm done with rutabagas, there will be no more rutabagas in my future. And I say, okay. And then 2 weeks later, I see her with a big old bowl of rutabagas. It is my job as her friend to remind her of the rutabaga commitment of 2 weeks prior. That is not me canceling Rachel. That is not me, and especially if she said it publicly. I'm done with rutabagas all of Facebook. No more rutabagas for me. As a matter of fact, I have completely organized my life against rutabagas. But she's doing it in the shadows. I see her doing it in some back room somewhere. It's not about the rutabagas, honeys. It's about the praxis and the congruence and the reliability. As her friend, I need to call her back. Whenever there's a question between behavior and values, stated values, there's only two ways to go. Change the behavior or change the value. I am not going to love Rachel any less if she says, you know what, I decided about the whole rutabaga thing. I'm okay with the rutabagas. And I say, yay, I'm going to go to Sprouts and buy you 10. Enjoy. Get on Facebook and tell people about your new love, your renewed love for rutabagas, so that you are not perpetrating a fraud. If you are going to be pro-rutabaga, be pro-rutabaga. That's not me calling you out. And if she's going to go and shame someone about rutabaga usage, then it is my job to say, but I saw you eat one last Saturday. That's not me calling her out in a toxic way. That's reminding her who she is. And a lot of times everybody wants, and this is very serious, and I hope it's not going beyond the scope, Charlene, because now we're talking about what it means to be community with each other. I have to love Rachel enough to lose community with her, even temporarily, to lose relationship with her. Because Rachel is going to want to say, it's not your business, Lace, it's not your lane. It absolutely is my lane. You told me you won't eat rutabagas anymore. I'm part of your story now. And so if we think of each other in Facebook as part of each other's stories, and my job is to help you be the woman you told me you want to be. I wouldn't have known about the rutabaga controversy if Rachel hadn't told me, but now I know, and I love her. So rutabagas, unless she decides, I don't feel the same way about rutabagas. Okay, but the whole idea is that you take responsibility for stating your intentions. My job as your friend and as your community member is to walk with you through it. That's not shame culture. And shame and conviction are also often conflated. I'm not trying to shame Rachel, but I am bringing her in alignment with her stated values. And she has a choice point, or depending on how well she likes rutabagas, she has a pain point as well. But I didn't get her there. And now she has to decide who she's going to be. My job as her friend is to stay with her either way, but not to enable. And that is the question that a lot of people have. How can I love Rachel without enabling her and without shaming her in a toxic way? How can I walk with her eye to eye? We have the same thing with teachers a lot of the times. Kids will say, I'm going to be quiet, Miss Holkenbrink. I'm going to be quiet, Miss Charlene. And Charlene, I'm going to love you regardless of whether or not, but I'm going to hold you to that stated. There they are. Here are the ones here are the norms that we all agreed on 10 weeks ago. You agreed too. I saw you thumbs up it. In fact, you're the one that made Rule 8. You're breaking Rule 8. I have to say it. It would be unfair of me and unkind of me not to call you back into norm number 8. Am I making sense? Thumbs up? Thank you. Okay. Phew.
Can I'm so sorry, Lisa. Can I just add on something? Just because I know you have a shared kind of background with Frary and stuff as well. Is this idea of love? Like, I think that a lot of times when we think about love, like as a collective, right? Not necessarily a Lace on Race group or like just kind of larger society. We have this perverted idea of what love is, though, right? We think about love as like the sweet holding hands, cuddly, kind of like, oh, like, you know, kind of like stars in the eyes sense of love. But we also have to really understand that love is so much more than that, right? Like that's why we think about like the idea of if you love yourself, right, you maybe you really want to eat, I don't know, like mine is like cheesecake every day. I would love to eat cheesecake every day, but I also have to reflect that, you know, a portion of loving myself is making sure that I can do it in a way that isn't going to put myself at detriment, right? And or like, but also like with your children, teaching them not to run out into the street and that there's consequences. Discipline and punishment are different. Let's make that very clear, right? And so like the idea of discipline, so that way there's respect, and also, right, like teaching my child who like my 2 children, like that there are differences in dynamics because of gender and sexuality and race and all of these things is a matter of love. It's not to shame my children because one of them is white passing, right? And like it's not to shame him. It's to tell him that I love him deeply, so he can also love the world around us deeply, to recognize those things are true and to make it to where it's more equitable and make it to more, even going beyond that, right, where these systems aren't in place from here on out, like love from the get-go. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's one reason why we hit on Hesed so much, because people are so used to love conflated with enabling, love conflated with I will back off and let you be you, no matter how destructive to self or others that you is. That's where Hesed comes in. It is strong, it is muscular, it is no nonsense. There's not a lot of hearts and flowers in Hesed. It's me grabbing you by the nape of the neck and pulling you out of the street so that that 18-wheeler doesn't get you. That means I have to risk it. And if you go, oh my gosh, it's like, yes, but you're here to tell the tale and yell at me. We need to be willing to risk relationship, to go deeper into relationship, both on a professional level in terms of pedagogy and also in terms of professional development, in terms of colleagues, and in terms of here in this online environment. I love you too much to allow you to drift away from the North Star. And if I allow you to do that, I am not doing you any favors. And I'm certainly not doing any favors for the people for whom the North Star was conceptualized. I do think that best practice is lessening and mitigating the harm endured by Black and brown people, perpetuated by white people, allowing you to get out of the car at 55 miles an hour, or to veer off of an off-ramp, or to take out a couple of sentences in there, or a couple of words in that sentence, usually including me, because they don't want to personalize, is doing no one any favors. If I'm looking you right in the eye and saying, I want what you want, then that means that I need to be willing to have you hate me a little in service to something greater so that we can love deeply and authentically again. That is true in any given learning or relational environment.
So
I can't believe we're almost done. It's crazy.
I know, it went by really fast. So if there's anything else that you'd like to add, Lace, I'm going to wrap it up. I have just a couple of things to mention.
I just want to thank you. I also want to say some things about Charlene that she isn't going to say. My birthday fundraiser was for Dignified Learning Project, and up to now, I think we're at $3,500, perhaps a little bit more, that is going to be going to 2 interns that will be making basically Charlene's mini-me's. And basically, let me tell you, the educational field needs more Charlene's. So absolutely. She's also, when we establish our advisory board, that's going to be morphing into a board, Charlene and Dignified Learning Project are our fiscal sponsors, but she is going to be giving us baby breath so that when we have a board, she is going to be one of our first sitting board members. And let me tell you what a privilege that is. You know how I feel about you, Charlene, so we're not going to do a lot of hearts and flowers, but there is such a dovetailing between the work we do and the work DLP does. And I just can't believe that I get to love on you both professionally and personally.
Don't make me cry, Lace. I don't like crying.
You made me cry last night.
But I appreciate that great deal, a great deal. I feel very honored to be able to work with you as well. And so I'm very glad that, we're going to continue this. So on that note, actually, we are having our 3rd annual Praxis in Education Conference, and Lace is in it. So I want to, that's one of that has been our annual conference. So Lace was in our first one and our second one, and she is an invited guest this year for our 3rd one. So what was that?
I accept.
Yes. We will be having that. It's going to be it's going to be from 9 to 2 on September 19th. There is an event on the Dignified Learning Project page, but I will set you as a co-host, Lace, so that way if you need to post anything or you want to share anything, feel free to. So like I said, we're going to have a couple different panels. The focus is on I have a whole thing, but it's reimagining kind of education and circumstances as a whole, because of COVID, and so that you can get more information. I believe that's the link. I'm gonna double check that. But Lace is going to be there, and so we would love to see some of you there virtually, of course, to join us for our 3rd annual Practicing Education Conference. And thank you for joining us today. If any of you have any kind of educational related questions or need some more guidance or collaboration or somebody to bounce ideas around, feel free to just reach out to me on the Dignified Learning Project, or you can reach out to me through email. I'll just write my email in here too, really fast. And otherwise, it was great to have you, and I look forward to interacting with some of you in some other capacity or something in the future.
We are also going to put up a new post. Danielle has her eyes big as like, she doesn't tell me, but a post where we can also continue this conversation at Lace on Race. So strictly educational questions, relational stuff, I get it. And we can cross-pollinate. I can talk on Charlene, Charlene's can talk on mine.
Also, the link, and maybe Charlene just said this, I was doing two things at once, but the link to the slides and two other links that Lace wanted me to provide to the participants, they're in the discussion thread of this event on the Facebook page. So you can find all that there.
Perfect.
Thank you. I just realized there were some comments in the chat bar. I don't know if we want to touch upon those, but they're.
Didn't we already hit them?
Where are they? I lost them just now. Oh, it was about face-to-face environment and the loss of tone and body language.
Yes. Yeah. Melissa, did you want to say something about that? Take yourself off.
I mean, I'm eating a burrito right now. Let's see. So usually when that question is posed, there's a couple of things that seem to come up as themes. That first one of tone and body language is a big one. So a lot of people will say, oh, well, you know, I can't read your body language online. I can't really tell your tone. As someone who is pretty limited to online interactions, it actually is possible to portray your tone and your body language through how you write. It's just that it's something that we not all of us are trained to do. And honestly, that's true even in face-to-face interactions. So as a white person, I don't have to regulate a lot of what I say or do, and I don't expect repercussions for the way I interact. That's not true for Black and brown people. So when we say, oh, well, you know, body language can be read in person, that's not true for everybody. So it's something that I think comes up mostly as an excuse of why there's miscommunication online. Well, actually online often betrays the patterns in how we communicate that uses power as a power dynamic. So top down, it's a lot easier to dissect in written form than it is to face, and it's often safer to dissect online than face-to-face. So if someone comes at me in, say, my work environment, so say I'm presenting and a man steps in and tries to explain on top of me, depending on how safe I feel, I may not confront that there. And so there's a lot of dynamics that happen face-to-face that we just miss because they're never confronted, because it's not a safe situation. So in online environments, there's it's not completely safe, but it's safe-ish enough that you're getting more of a direct confrontation. So that's something as a white person, I'm not used to being directly spoken to. And so I perceive that as, oh, you know, you're coming off strong and you just misunderstood me. Well, no, that's not exactly true. So I think there's a tendency to see accountability as an attack because we don't even have accountability as white people in day-to-day interactions. Face-to-face accountability is lacking. Even in my interactions with my children, okay, well, you know, do I teach them how to hold me accountable? And so I think that it's easy to frame it as a misunderstanding in online spaces, and I don't think that that's necessarily true.
Thank you for that.
We're 4 minutes over. This is such a great conversation. I wish we had longer.
I agree. And then Jesse, to touch upon yours just really fast, feel free to email me, and I would love to be able to have some more conversations if you feel that, you know, we could work on that or something. Yeah, so I mean, we are, as Lace said, we are 4 minutes over. So it's been great. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.
Thank you. There, Jesse said I will. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Lace. I love you.
Everyone. I love you hard. Bye, Rachel.
Thank you.
What a great time. We need to do this again.
Yes.
Soon. Bye, Charlene.
Bye, Mom.
I love you.
I love you too. I have to edit that out now.
Good night, everybody. It's 1:07.
Oh, wow. Good night. Bye.